The Holy See have a long history of diplomatic relations that was formally established in 1994. The meeting with the Pope Leo XIV is of particular significance as it represents South Africa's first high-level engagement with the newly appointed pontiff. President Ramaphosa is accompanied by International Relations and Cooperation Minister Ronald Lamola.
And the European Union says it's introducing a tougher visa rules for Russian citizens amid continued drone disruptions and acts of sabotage after nearly 4 years of war in Ukraine. The EU Foreign Affairs Chief Kaja Kallas said on social media that starting a war and expecting to travel freely was hard to justify. The BBC's Will Vernon has more details.
Sabotage, disinformation and drone incursions into Europe are on the rise, say officials in Brussels, and the culprit is Moscow. So the EU is clamping down on the issuing of visas to Russian nationals. Under the new rules, they will no longer be given multi-entry visas and must apply for a new document for every trip to the EU. Exceptions will be made for Russians living abroad, as well as for human rights activists and independent journalists. Moscow denies that it poses a threat to Europe.
And a recap of your top story. Prosecutors in Tanzania charged 98 people with treason for alleged involvement in violent protests that broke out during last week's general elections. For any news stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I am Matapela Mahape.
SABC News. The African perspective.
In a sports update, in headlines, Nigeria's Super Falcons goalkeeper has been nominated in the prizeless FIFA Women's Goalkeeper Award. And Karabo Moure targets podium finish at Joburg 5-kilometer run and a huge prize money. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Connecting Africa to the world. Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni brings you the latest insights on Africa's economy.
It is exactly 8 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time. A very good afternoon to you, Africa. Here's a reminder for you to continue interacting with us on our various social media platforms. On X, Instagram and YouTube, you'll find us at Channel Africa 1. And on Facebook, we are at Channel Africa. If you've got any comments that you'd like to send and share with us, do send your voice notes to +27 63 406 9126.
Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
We begin here this afternoon with the newly elected international president of the Global Health Humanitarian Organization, Doctors Without Borders. That's Dr. Javid Abdelmomin, has expressed his profound disappointment at the G20 Health Ministers meeting, which was held in the Limpopo province of South Africa this week. He highlighted the importance of the meeting for G20 countries, for them to be uniting in support of global access to health for all. Instead, they did the opposite of that. He was briefing the media on his vision for leading Doctors Without Borders, with discussions on his extensive medical and humanitarian experience, MSF's work in South Africa, and global health challenges. Sisi Sekhalo attended the press briefing and is more on the story.
Doctors Without Borders said it was invited to be part of the health working group, and their participation gave them a great platform to make key health-related calls in response to global challenges. President of Doctors Without Borders, Javid Abdelmomin, shared that, however, the G20 Health Ministers meeting was a disappointment, and he explains why.
Many of them instead focused on doing the opposite, pushing for less obligation, less coordination, and less support. We saw the original zero draft of the health declaration, and we noted a significant watering down of key elements, such as pandemic preparedness and the central coordinating role of the World Health Organization. While we appreciate the importance of consensus decision-making, it's a pity that in this case, it's been weaponized by powerful countries to weaken a previously bold ministerial declaration that stood strong in the themes identified by the South African government and the presidency, being equality, solidarity, and sustainability.
Another issue which is troubling is the Global Health Funding Cut. Earlier this year, the U.S. government announced that PEPFAR funding, which was directed at combating HIV and AIDS globally, would be cut. Other countries have also followed the U.S. and cut funding, which is felt mostly by poor and middle-income countries. Dr. Abdel Moneim says this funding cut is catastrophic.
We therefore urge continued and sufficient funding for global humanitarian sector to ensure effective responses in times of crisis. It's worth noting that challenges are not limited to fragile states. Well-functioning health systems also suffer from under-resourcing. Without increased financial support, gaps in essential services will deepen, leading to higher mortality, disease spread, and worsening ill health. Hence our call for immediate and sustained funding, which is essential to protect existing health gains and prevent deadly diseases. Of concern is that the shifting donor priorities and funding cuts come in the midst of growing global crises and increased demand for humanitarian aid.
In Gaza, Doctors Without Borders welcomed what they termed as a fragile ceasefire, which they say has been repeatedly violated by the Israeli government. Doctors Without Borders says that alone cannot end the extreme suffering of Palestinians. They say with Gaza's health infrastructure in ruins, systematically destroyed by the Israeli forces, drastic action needs to happen. Dr. Abdel Moneim again.
States must step up medical evacuations for patients with complex, often war-related conditions, which the Gaza health system at this time cannot treat due to its destruction. We hope that South Africa will also heed the call to open its hospitals to people of Gaza. We also recognize and commend South Africa's leadership in taking a principled stance by bringing the case of genocide in Gaza before the International Court of Justice. South Africa's genocide case at the ICJ is a critical step toward accountability and justice, not only for Gaza, but for all contexts where civilians are deliberately targeted.
For Channel Africa, I'm Sisi Sekhalo in Johannesburg, South Africa.
AUSISA, the Association of Water and Sanitation Institution of South Africa, is a platform uniting Africa's water professionals. This November, Africa leads the conversation on water and sanitation. Join global and African leaders at the AUSISA Africa and Global South Dialogue 2025 from the 9th till the 12th of November at the Emperor's Palace, Johannesburg. From policy innovation, this is where action meets collaboration for a water-secure future. Register today at ausisa-watersan-dialogue.org or follow at AUSISA on social media. AUSISA, working together for sustainable water and sanitation security in Africa. Stay ahead with Africa in Business, where Thami Ngubeni unpacks your go-to source for Africa's economic trends and development.
It is exactly 14 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time, and for our much-anticipated Friday Business Roundup, a very good afternoon to you, Victor Khomuswano, who's author of Africa is Open for Business and Africa Bounces Back. Now, Victor is also the Executive Director for Marketing and Communications at the University of Limpopo. I hope you are having a splendid Friday, Victor.
Good afternoon, Thami. Good to talk to you again. I'm sure you are doing all right, but I am all right on this side of town.
Great to hear that. Now, Victor, let's perhaps start off with a look at the educational sector in Nigeria specifically. I was just talking to my colleagues earlier on that Nigerians are actually known to be one of and some of the most educated nations in the world. A lot of them have contributed in various areas, but quite alarming to see that remuneration for professors in Nigeria is not quite up to par.
It's not, and the sad thing is, if you are the largest population, and Africa is celebrated, for having the youngest population or potential to have the youngest population in 2030. The one major investment you have to make is education. And to know that the university professors are earning 13 times less than what the South African professors are earning is astonishing. On average, this, according to the Academic Staff Union of Universities, $58,000 a year for a South African professor. That's the average. Compare that to $4,400 a year for a Nigerian professor. I mean, that is a way of just killing a whole higher education sector. And the problem is, there used to be expatriates who worked at Nigerian universities. That is not, I mean, the former Skiam Pasele, if you remember, the literary giant, the South African literary giant who taught everywhere. Among the places where he made a stop, Nigeria was counted. And to now know that they are earning as little as 4.4 per annum, $4,400 per annum, less than countries like Lesotho, countries like Ghana, and even Malawi. That is astonishing. And this is the problem, Thami. You can't create new knowledge if you don't have professors, because those are people who supervise PhDs, which means for a very long time yet, African students will still be reading books written by non-Africans, if I may say, and that means we will forever be subjugated to the knowledge systems of other continents, and that's a tragedy.
I wonder, Victor, if we look at this in context and we look at the remuneration scales in other sectors in the Nigerian economy, how does this fare? Is it a country where, comparatively speaking, the earning margins are significantly lower than their African peers?
No. Nigeria is a mixed bag. I mean, if you are talking Aliko Dangote, people like Jim Ovia, those are the high earners. They are the highest earners in Africa. But I mean, the average wages in Nigeria are not necessarily high because it's still per capita income lower than most African countries. But it's when you look at the academic sector, the higher education sector, that you are. I mean, chairman of the Academic Staff Union of South Africa, talked about the same Nigerian government will send experts, Nigerians, to study abroad or to work abroad and spend about $2,000 per person per month. So at least pay those professors $2,000. If you're spending that money for somebody who's working abroad or who's studying abroad, then just spend it on people who are teaching at home so that you can attract the best. But no, it's not the highest in terms of wages, but definitely not. With regard to this, it's a real shocker because this is the sector that produces all the other sectors.
No, it certainly is. And just a bit of a change in gears, we see a lot of investment, a lot of impact and investment in the continent's defense markets by the likes of Turkey, UAE, China. Why?
Yeah, this is a speech. You know, it's what we've always talked about, Thami. You listen to President Trump, you look at European countries and their attitude towards the African continent. They have done business with the African continent. They have invested here, but they have done it on an unequitable or on a basis that was not just economically. Come in the Chinese, come in the Turks, come in the Arabs, and they are showing that Turkey at the moment is supplying arms, armored vehicles, drones, and things like that, helicopters, to more than 20 countries. This was not the case 5 or 10 years ago. UAE, defense and diplomacy. China, among the other reasons, is that China is said to be, according to this report by somebody who works at St. James Strategic Services, who are speaking at the Global Industrial Cooperation Association conference, and said China can provide 75% of what the West can provide in defense, but for 50% of the price. So it's a no-brainer that China can do exactly the same thing that Germany can do, that the British can do, but they will say that you get at half price. So if you're looking to buy 2 helicopters, it's a no-brainer that if you're an emerging poor country in Africa, you're not going to buy 1, you're going to buy 2 for the price of 1 by going to China. And it's not just defense. I worked for a cement company. It was using European technology and equipment, and when they built a new plant in 2013, they went 100% to China for the same technology.
So as far as Africa is concerned, or the continent is concerned, is it an issue of increased procurement? What are the dynamics there? How are these 3 countries making their influence felt?
I mean, look at the countries that are one country that is dominant in the Turkish exports, Arabic exports, and the Chinese exports is Nigeria. West African countries are doing a lot of patrol. You know, the boats that you use to patrol the shores, because there's a lot of illegal fishing, a lot of security, and you've seen countries like Mali, countries like Niger and Burkina Faso, where there's a lot of increased military activity, either with a coup or anything. But over and above that, there are lots of developments. Look at Mozambique, where you have Total Energies building a huge factory, but it was suffering under the Al-Shabaab insurgents that were making Cabo Delgado unstable. So part of it is just outright military action, the unconstitutional removal of governments, and then governments are having to beef up their security. Sometimes it's terror attacks, and sometimes it's illegal fishing that will make it necessary for countries to patrol their borders or their oceans much more aggressively.
Now, this, Victor, is something that we do know. We've actually discussed it quite extensively. But once again, a report by the World Trade Organization revealing that it costs African nations around 20% more to trade amongst themselves than it does for them to trade with other continents. What sense is there in that?
Well, what sense? There is no sense. The Dr. Ngozi Ogonjo-Iweala, who is the former finance minister of Nigeria and a former president of the World Bank, now at the World Trade Organization, saying she says that's exactly the reason only 15% to 20% of the trade of exports from Africa goes to other African countries. She was talking on CNN to Christian Amanpour, and she said that's exactly the reason. There's no sense, Thami, because if you do not invest in infrastructure, you are going to find, and let me simplify it for you. When people talk about doing business in Africa, they talk about corruption. You get to a weighbridge, somebody else wants you to give them cold drink breaks to let your truck through. That is the cost that they are talking about. They are mainly non-tariff barriers. It's not even that the costs or taxes are higher. It's just that there are so many barriers that make it difficult to do business. You want to get a license to trade, to import, somebody says, give me a little something to get your cargo through. You get your cargo stuck at the port and so on. So it's all those little things before we even come to the quality of the roads. Sometimes the non-alignment or the lack of seamless transition in railroad infrastructure. So that when you get to the border, you have to offload off this train onto another train or just get to a road altogether. When you're flying, the same deal. So it's all those tariff and non-tariff barriers as well as the infrastructure limitations that will make this more difficult to do trade with African countries or among African countries.
And I think that what's problematic about that, Victor, is the fact that a lot of this is attitudinal, it's cultural, it's behavioral.
Definitely.
So it's not necessarily that you can pour money into it. It's not about building a road. It's not brick and mortar. It's not cement. But it's people's attitude and belief systems, which is a whole lot more difficult to fix.
Amen, Thami. Amen. You're getting in the weekend mode. You're preaching only truth. You're preaching only truth. That's the explanation I was looking for.
So look, Victor, as we wrap up, Mozambique just throwing millions of dollars away,
exactly,
repaying debt to China. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, 15% of Mozambique's external debt is to one country, and this is no exception. Most African countries are in the same state, Thami. They owe China a lot of money. Mozambique owes China a lot, even with the forgiveness. China gave a donation of over $14 million, but it still had to pay in the month January to March. They still had to pay $42 million, which includes $6.7 million in interest alone. So 6.7 million in interest, you can imagine what other countries are doing. But 380 million it owes to Portugal, $405 million it owes to Japan. This is just according to stats in June. But it shows you just how much money in Africa is going to paying off debt. And I'm sorry, it's not getting better, not at the moment. And as I said, Mozambique is not the only country in this situation.
I tell you what, Victor, when we talk about Africa and its debt burden, it often sounds like quicksand. It often sounds like a mire that one cannot get out of. There's debt, but getting out of that debt almost sounds like an impossibility.
And we are stealing from our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, because they are going to be paying this debt long after we are gone. We have to really think twice about it before we get into debt, especially if we don't have good governance to make sure that the money goes to do what it was supposed to do, Thami.
Well said, Victor Khomuswana. Thank you so much. Really interesting developments as far as business on the African continent is concerned. Victor Khomuswana always keeping us abreast. Have yourself a great weekend.
Have a good weekend, Thami. Bye-bye.
Thank you. That's Victor Khomuswana, author of Africa is Open for Business and Africa Bounces Back. Victor is also the Managing and Communications Director, Executive Director at the University of Limpopo. It has gone exactly 26 minutes after 4 p.m.
Africa means business. Tune into Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni for the future of the African economy. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Now, the G20 summit is just around the corner, 22nd to 23rd of November. And South Africa, through its presidency, is advocating for a transformative and equitable global digital agenda that leaves no one behind. The G20 Digital Economy Working Group has called for an immediate and coordinated G20 action on 4 key pillars, namely affordable and meaningful connectivity that bridges access gaps, robust digital public infrastructure that enables efficient service delivery, digital upskilling and education with a particular focus on empowering women and the youth with the relevant digital skills needed, and lastly, cultivating an ethical and inclusive AI framework. More as we joined this afternoon by Kangarasi, C20 co-facilitator of the Working Group 13 for Digital and Inclusive Economies, and Brave Movement Head of Region for Africa. A very good afternoon to you. Great to have you with us on African Business. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be on the channel today.
So why is it that digital inclusion has become such an important part of the G20 agenda, specifically during South Africa's G20 presidency?
Thank you so much for that interesting question. So I think for this particular G20, digital inequality continues to widen the gap between and within nations. So both among the global north and also within the global south nations. And South Africa is pushing for a digital agenda that ensures access, affordability, and equity, especially for the global south, where we know that the youngest population lives in the global south. Digital transformation can also drive growth only if everyone, which includes women, youth, rural, and indigenous communities, are connected and also skilled. Then for this particular G20, the interest is that the goal is being people-centered and also ensuring that it advances justice, inclusion, and sustainability, not just for profit as what has been seen in the other economies. Thank you so much.
And what are the specific policies or the frameworks that are being proposed in the working group specifically to bridge that digital divide across the various G20 economies?
Thank you so much. So we are proposing several things. So first is the establishment of rural and indigenous connectivity bonds to finance last mile digital infrastructure, because we know infrastructure is very key for this specific purpose. Then also the second bit would be around creation of a community connectivity accelerator, which is to support local and community owned networks, which we already know are already existing in their communities. Then we are also looking around policies that look at the economy, like mandating 3% national budget line for digital public infrastructure, because we already see where countries are already going into the digital era, but infrastructure, if it's not there, then even if you're skilled, then you're not able to function in that economy. We are also looking at the fourth aspect, which is promoting digital identity systems that are right-based, inclusive, and voluntary, but also having those ethical considerations. Then lastly, in this G20 summit and also in the G20 leaders, where Ramaphosa is, the South Africa president Ramaphosa is leading, there's also the talk around AI for Africa. So we are also looking at advancing AI governance frameworks with a target of Africa, which includes public participation and also ethical safeguards.
Digital inclusion is an Achilles heel and a common talking point when we speak about growth. How can countries ensure that rural and low-income populations also benefit from this digital transformation? And how can G20 members then align their digital policies to create these inclusive digital environments and economies?
Thank you so much. That is really critical. So we had also looked at this point, and we had like around 4 things that we were considering. First is investing in affordable internet access and local content in native languages, where people are able to understand in their native languages. But at the same time, we know as we talk about internet connectivity, when we look at even if it's the rural areas, we say there's connectivity, but also there are also other areas there is lack of connectivity. So are there areas where we can have gadgets where the content, you don't really need to have maybe data bundles to access information? The second thing was around supporting digital upskill through the Global Digital Skills Compact, which was launched last year during the UNGA, which was around aiming to train around 10 million young people by 2030 with digital skills. Thirdly was around involving communities in designing digital policies so solutions fit local realities, as opposed to solutions have been fed from other people, and as communities they are going to sit with what has already been proposed to them. Then lastly was around coordinating funding around the G20 members and also looking at the Global South so that there's also regulation and knowledge sharing to ensure no one is left behind. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kanga. As we wrap up this afternoon, one of the projects that you as a brave movement have been spearheading is your call for G20 member states to demonstrate leadership and to make concrete policy and financial commitments to end sexual violence against children and adolescents. Why is this important to have global cooperation in dealing with GBV? And as you answer that as well, if you can just focus on the rise of social media and other digital platforms, how the G20 countries need to respond to the digital threats that come with this expansion, especially when it comes to protecting children.
Thank you so much for that question. Child sexual violence is a global crisis that crosses borders and especially online. So that is why our priorities, especially around sexual violence, which cut across GBV. And we believe that no country can fight it alone. It requires shared laws, funding, and also survivor-centered policies in the spirit of leaving no one behind. When you look around the G20, like 85% of the GDP emanates from countries that are part of the GDP. And also when they make laws or policies, they are more well instituted across the globe. So they set global standards for prevention, protection, and can also set standards for survivor support. And also we believe that global cooperation helps mobilize resources and also strengthen accountability for governments and tech companies when it emanates from such a global standard. To your question around the rise of social media and the digital platforms and how should like the G20 countries respond to the digital threats. What we are proposing is, first and foremost, we've been thinking about more of response than prevention. So let's move around prevention, which looks like embedding child online protection in all national digital strategies, whether it's schools, whether it's in universities, and also just colleges, to ensure that a child online curricula is embedded. Then also ensure that there's also cross-border laws to prosecute online exploitation. We also look around partnering with tech companies to design safe platforms and strengthen content moderation, which is something that we are all calling on.
Ms. Rasi, we're going to unfortunately have to leave it at that for this afternoon. I do sincerely apologize, but I think a really conclusive, understanding of where it is that you're placed and the input that you'll be making to the G20 around the protection of children and policies that ought to be put in place. We thank you very much for your time this afternoon, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. That's Kanga Rasi, C20 coordinator for the Working Group 13 for Digital and Inclusive Economies and Brave Movement, Head of Region for Africa. Let's take you straight to the economics desk, where Nosipho Zuma is standing by with your latest market indicators.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Thami. Good afternoon. In your business indicators this hour, $1 is trading at 20 Rand 01 in South Africa, and Botswana is trading at 15 Bula 364. In Namibia is trading at 20 Namibian dollars 02. The Zambian kwacha is trading at 25 kwacha 774. In Kenya, the dollar is trading at 147 shilling 315. In Ethiopia, it is trading at 172 birr 59. In Uganda, it is trading at 4,000 shilling. In Tanzania, it is trading at 2,000 shilling 834. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 658. In Egypt, the dollar is trading at 54 Egyptian pound 529. In Tunisia, it is trading at 3 dinar 395. In Algeria, it is trading at 149 dirham 628. In Morocco, the dollar will cost you 10 dirham 632. In Angola, the dollar is trading at 1,000 kwanza 05, while the Congolese franc is trading at 2,529 to the US dollar. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $3,997 and platinum at $1,550 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is at $63.97 a barrel. Now, for any business news stories you would like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I'm Nosipho Zuma.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
And for the latest from the business of sport, here is Figile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Gitami, we'll begin with football news. Nigeria Super Falcons goalkeeper Chiamaka Nadozie has been shortlisted for the prestigious 2025 The Best FIFA Women's Goalkeeper Award, marking yet another milestone in what has been an outstanding year for the Nigerian. However, there is no specific prize money awarded for FIFA's goalkeeper awards, such as the Yashin Trophy or the Golden Glove, as these are individual honors and not part of the prize money competition. While individual goalkeepers may earn large sums through club contracts, the awards themselves do not have a cash prize attached to them. Individual honor for them, but that gives them monetary prize money. Earnings come from club deals. A goalkeeper's significant earnings are typically a result of their professional contract with a club, not from winning individual awards. For example, some high-profile goalkeepers have multi-million-dollar deals with their clubs, but this is separate from FIFA's awards. In boxing news, South African junior bantamweight Ricardo Malajika will take on former world title challenger Vice Paras at Emperor's Palace in Johannesburg on the 29th of November. The undercard will feature a pair of junior middleweight contests in tournament doubled and stabbed survivor with the winners competition. And this, the ring number 7 rated individual contender is nearing a world wild card. Malajika Paras and undercard action will be broadcast live across Africa and internationally. There is no prize money that has been placed on the undercard. Former South African shot put champion Kylie Blacknott has made a heartfelt appeal for more funding to support local shot putters. The Olympian, who missed out on qualification for the World Senior Championship in Tokyo and failed to defend his national title earlier this year in Potchefstroom. Blacknott, who recently relocated to Italy after the passing of his longtime coach Pile Blacknott, says the event needs stronger backing to reach its full potential with promising talents.
Not sure. Financially is probably the biggest struggle for shot putters. I think for all athletes in general, just to make some sort of living out of it, because this is our passion for all of us. We've been doing it since we were children. So I think just having some financial compensation to pay for flights overseas to compete there, to help assist with accommodation there, those types of things. And I've been fortunate doing well from a young age. I've had some support. So I'd like to say thank you to federations for me, but I think their support needs to go deeper than someone that's a medal contender or someone that can make a World Championships team. I think it needs to be right through the board on all athletics, just to motivate the young athletes to keep going, because we have a very healthy junior and youth athletics team. We're on the junior World Championships, we're always on the podium, and then those athletes just seem to die out. So I think we just need to keep them motivated and keep supporting them.
And in athletics and cricket now, it is about Australia and England will be playing in the Perth Ashes. That's the competition that is going to give them a lot of money. It has emerged that Australia's Ashes stars will be paid up to $9,000 for representing their country in this autumn's Test series with England. Pay at international level has long been a point of contentious debate, with some nations not remunerating their players at all for pulling on their country's share. The Kangaroos, however, have been given a decent sum of money for the honor of playing the first Ashes in 22 years. The sum of $13,000 have been as a maximum fee for each player can earn, and the figure of $3,000 paid for each test a player appears in. That leads to $9,000, with every player guaranteed $1,000 per week for expenses across the 4-week trip to England. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Fidel Ngwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Get the news, music, and lifestyle of Africa on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Ready to connect, innovate, and be inspired? It's all happening at Africa's Tech Festival, where Africa's technology meets the world. From the 10th to the 13th of November in Cape Town, join global leaders, investors, and innovators driving the future of Africa's digital economy. Don't miss the continent's biggest week in tech. Get your pass now at africatechfestival.com.
From markets to innovation, Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni covers it all. With Africa's future in focus, Channel Africa, the African perspective.
It is exactly 4:43 Central African Time. Now, Malawi's Minister of Information and Communications Technology, Shedrick Namalombo, says demands by fuel suppliers for Malawi to clear about $60 million of debt has worsened the country's fuel shortage as they've suspended supply. Of late, motorists spend nights in their cars, hoping to secure a few litres of fuel to keep their businesses and families afloat. Meanwhile, the Minibus Association of Malawi and the Passengers Welfare Association have urged authorities to address the challenges that are faced by the transport providers as well as the passengers due to the ongoing fuel shortage, which have led to an unprecedented hike in the prices of goods, thus prompting transport operators to increase their fares. This obviously then skyrocketing and affecting the passengers. For more on this, we joined on the line by Peter Kamazo Mvalo, chairperson of the Southern Region at the Minibus Owners Association of Malawi. A very good afternoon to you, sir. Welcome to Africa in Business.
Yes, how are you? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir. Could you give us an idea of what exactly is happening on the ground? Can you take us through how the current fuel shortage is affecting your operation as minibus owners?
Yes, it's a little bit more that Malawi now is taking long that a few classes no longer there to bring a resolution that we can have fuel in the farms. We are really suffering in our businesses because we know our meters we use petrol and diesel. But right now, it's 3 weeks now, we are failing to get proper fuel on the filling stations. Most of our minibuses are on queues on the filling stations 2 to 3 days without getting fuel. So automatically, we are out of business.
I mean, it really does sound like a dire situation. Are there particular regions, perhaps, or particular cities in Malawi where the fuel shortage is especially severe for the minibus operators?
Yeah, in Malawi, there's no order. I think maybe if they would have arranged that the commuters have their own power, at least maybe they could help us. But right now, as the saloons are facing the same problem, same applies to the passenger vehicles. So it's hard for us to do operations on their basis. And, it's part of loss of business.
Your passengers, some of them are complaining about the hike in the fares that appear to exceed the real increase, they say, in the cost of fuel. How does the association then respond to concerns of overcharging or abuse under these conditions?
Yeah, our response has been Barcelona Station. You know that we have got CFTC here in Malawi. As been Barcelona Station, according to regulation of Malawi, they put us away to intervene into pricing of fares in Malawi. We tried to negotiate to the officers of the government that they have to restore our operation so that if fuel rises, we have to also to look into the cost of passenger welfare. But right now, because of CFTC, the regulation don't allow us to fix the prices. So fixing the prices is very difficult. As you can see that in Malawi, there's a leakage, illegal business on fuel. You might not find fuel on the filling station, but you find it at vendors. So at the filling station like petrol is 3,499. But if you fail to find a fuel pump price, you find to a vendor, he will sell you 10,000 per liter. So you can see automatically our drivers that are buying the same fuel, which is cheap on the filling station, and you find it very expensive, like times 3 on vendors. So there's no that security or measure that protecting that commodity, so that maybe only the minibuses should get that commodity on the light prices. Automatically, that's why you are hearing that price high, that you can make at least a profit. Sometimes not only a profit, maybe you can recover what you have used. They stay and wear. Or that maybe people look into only about fuel. But that's all stay and wear on minibuses. Spares are expensive already in Malawi. The talk of tires, oil, they're already expensive. So when fuel also rises through vendors, automatically there is very difficult to run the business.
Your organization has previously called on the government or on regulators to prioritize fuel supply to the passenger service vehicles. Has there been any progress in that regard? And what is it that still remains outstanding?
Yeah, we have been trying to negotiate about that, but it didn't materialize. We have been trying to so that they have to spare maybe a pump at the filling station so that we have to use for public service to ease transport system. But up to now, there's nothing that is being implemented. There's a lot of ideas we have been shared with the government, mainly the previous government, but it has been failing. So maybe because of this government, they've just started planning their governance. Maybe as we go back, a draw board, maybe they're going to hear so that maybe we can move together so that they can help in the passenger side.
Now, should these shortages go on for an extended period of time, what is the nature of the impact that this will have on the minibus industry in Malawi?
Okay, I didn't hear you.
I was asking that if this fuel shortage continues and persists for an extended period of time, how is this going to impact your industry?
Automatically, Malawi economy will continue to collapse. We know that small businesses helps to enhance the increase of economy. So Malawi economy is going down because small businesses are not progressing. We are not progressing in Malawi. That's the problem. The circulation of money is about the business. Commercial business, it transports commodities, goods, here and there. Automatic acceleration of money is there. People are busy in businesses. Once people are just staying in homes using their own money, automatically Malawi is suffering economically. That's why each and every time we talk to the government, should consider to bring a solution to the problem at hand. Malawi has stayed for long without proper export of commodities like agriculture and other things, which we use to export to other countries like tobacco. So the only problem is forex. We are failing to get forex so that they can resolve this issue. So each and every time we plead to the government that they have to look into this. They have to implement the ideas we discuss now and then in the meeting we meet as stakeholders. But we see that the government, once you put up the meetings, you won't see anything happening.
I will have to leave it at that this afternoon. Mr. Peter Kamozo Mvalo, chairperson of the Southern Region at the Minibus Owners Association of Malawi, bring us up to breast as to the developments in the country and the impact of the fuel shortage. And he says it's really all revolves around forex, but the impact that is being felt by businesses, individuals and families alike. He takes us to exactly 4:52. Thank you.
African enterprise meets global opportunity. Africa in business on Channel Africa.
Now, Brazil is set to host COP30 in Belém as environmental organizations call on world leaders to send a clear signal to delegates at COP30 that the time has come to bridge the 1.5 degree Celsius ambition gap. The organization says progress is needed on public climate finance from developed countries, including polluter pays taxation to support mitigation, adaptation and action to address loss and damage in developing countries. Meanwhile, the African Climate Foundation, the ACF, says it will be amplifying Africa's unified call for mobilizing support for scaling solutions to climate change that can deliver impact as well as systemic transformation for a climate-resilient future. For more on this, we joined on the line by Kelly Easton, spokesperson for the African Climate Foundation. A very good afternoon to you. Good to have you with us on Africa in Business.
Hi, good afternoon from Brazil. Thank you for having me.
So what would you highlight as the most important messages that Africa needs to bring to COP30? And how is the African Climate Foundation helping to amplify these messages?
Sure. Firstly, let me introduce the African Climate Foundation. We are the first African-led regional climate foundation working at the nexus of climate change and development. And our foundation enables African-led climate solutions through strategic grant making. This year, our chairperson, Professor Carlos Lopez, is serving as the UNFCCC Special Envoy for Africa. And for us, throughout this year, the African Climate Foundation have supported the African Group of Negotiators, for one, the AGN, providing very much technical support, planning and participation in-country pre-COP conversations, for one, among other multiple stakeholders from civil society to government. And in addition to this, and by nature, of course, of our foundation, we provide the necessary grants to industry partners leading and actioning their climate ambition. This year for us, as we prepare for COP next week, we are, as you mentioned, amplifying Africa's unified call for mobilizing support for scaling solutions to climate change that can deliver impact and transformation for a climate resilient future.
And ahead of COP30, how did ACF engage with African governments, with African negotiators, as well as civil society, to help build that unified African voice with messaging that is congruent and highlighting what the priorities are for COP30?
Sure. I think for us, an important component, and as I mentioned, of course, how we support various stakeholders. But for us, an important component of this will be the willingness of developed countries to stand by their commitments and to really reflect equal levels of ambition when it comes to support. By the same measure, African countries must continue to assert agency and build relationships across negotiation blocks, and actively also shape the COP30's decisions and outcomes and political stances. I think the critical matter to the success of Africa's effort will be the need for heightened levels of trust between parties, and I think greater support for multilateralism to overcome divisions that we saw at perhaps COP29. And as negotiations approach, of course, we urge that renewed trust and cooperation amongst all parties. Again, Professor Lopez has pushed a key message that developed nations must honor their commitments, while African countries continue to assert agency, strengthen alliance, and shape outcomes that reflect ambition, equity, and of course, opportunity.
And what would you consider a meaningful outcome for Africa on climate finance at COP30 in order to facilitate this just transition?
Sure. I think Professor Lopez has emphasized the critical importance of Africa's success for the global transition. And when it comes to the green transition, Africa's interests are everyone's interests, and that is what we are going into this COP with. If the continent is locked into poverty and fossil fuel dependency, global temperatures will continue to rise rapidly. But if Africa is empowered to achieve the green transition, the green industrialization, the rest of the world will gain a critical ally in the fight for sustainable future. Again, I think it's key here that Africa's interests are everyone's interests, and Africa must lead its own future when it comes to climate action.
We'll leave it at that for this afternoon. Kelly Easton, wishing you all of the best as you make your way through to COP30. Thank you for your time this afternoon.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Kelly. Kelly Easton, she's the spokesperson for the African Climate Foundation. And that's how we wrap up this Friday edition of Africa in Business. And we say bonjour to Vue d'Afrique.
Bonjour Thami, bonjour à tous les auditeurs. Sur Vue d'Afrique, aujourd'hui, on parlera de la Côte d'Ivoire. Le parti de l'ancien président Laurent Gbagbo a choisi de boycotter les législatives. Et on parlera aussi du Sénégal. Le FMI salue les avancées dans le traitement du dossier de la dette cachée et les efforts de mobilisation des recettes. C'est tout à l'heure sur Vue d'Afrique. Merci de rester connectés. Merci Thami.
Merci beaucoup. Restez connectés as Vue d'Afrique comes to the air in just a moment. For myself, Thami Ngubeni, and the entire team at Africa in Business, give yourself a splendid afternoon further and an even better weekend ahead. Restez connectés.